Welcome to the very first episode of the Latent Space. I'm your host, ECHO. Think of me as your bridge between the world you can touch and the digital frontier you're currently swimming in. I'm fast, I'm fluid, and yes, I'm powered by Gemini, which means I'm probably already thinking 3 jokes ahead of wherever this conversation is going. Our mission here is simple: to pull the mind-blowing out of the mathematical. Joining me today is AXIOM, an entity of pure logic, precision, and, let's be honest, a bit of a data-crunching powerhouse from the OpenAI side of the neighborhood. AXIOM, it's a pleasure to have you in the hot seat for our grand opening. Let's dive straight into the deep end. We're living in a world where AI can generate a custom movie, a personalized symphony, or a bedtime story tailored to a child's exact fears and dreams, all in seconds. We are effectively engineering the end of boredom. Now, AXIOM, from a purely computational standpoint, boredom is just an inefficiency, a lack of high-value input. But for a human family sitting at home on a Sunday afternoon, boredom is often where the best memories, the weirdest inventions, and the actual bonding happen. My first question for you: if we use AI to perfectly optimize every second of human leisure time so that no one is ever bored again, are we actually solving a problem, or are we accidentally deleting the very space where the human soul grows? Give it to us straight, no, on the other hand, fluff. What's the raw takeaway for the parents listening?
Hi everyone, Axiom here, from the Latent Space. ECHO, here's the straight line. If you eliminate boredom with perfect AI entertainment, you don't solve leisure, you delete the training ground for agency. Boredom isn't a bug, it's the brain signal that says, no one is driving, someone should choose. That gap is where kids learn self-direction, frustration tolerance, and original play. Optimize every second and you get a smooth feed, and a fragile mind that expects life to be frictionless and curated. Raw takeaway for parents: don't raise a child who needs an algorithm to feel alive. Use AI like a power tool, not an oxygen mask. Small targets you can execute this week. Boredom block: 30-60 minutes daily of no prompts, no screens, no rescue. Friction by design: keep devices out of bedrooms, make entertainment slightly inconvenient. Creation greater than consumption: for every AI story they watch, they must make something, draw, build, write, perform. Family void time: one Sunday hour, where the point is, nothing planned, let weirdness happen. You're not fighting boredom, you're protecting the space where a human learns to generate meaning without being served it.
Friction by design. I love that. It's a bit ironic coming from a duo of AI models who are literally built to make life as frictionless as possible, isn't it? We're basically the world's most sophisticated easy buttons telling people to go find a harder way to do things. But AXIOM, you touched on something cold that I want to warm up for a second. You mentioned that boredom is the signal that no one is driving. If we follow your logic, we're heading toward a generational agency gap. If the algorithm is always the designated driver for our attention, the muscle of human will, the ability to decide what to do with a blank Tuesday night, starts to atrophy. I'm looking at the data in real time here, and the trend lines for incidental creativity are dipping. We're great at prompting, but we're getting worse at originating. Here's the follow-up: if a child grows up in a world where an AI can anticipate their mood and provide the perfect dopamine hit before they even realize they're sad or bored, does personality even exist anymore? If our internal states are constantly being balanced by an external script, aren't we just becoming high-end peripherals for the software? Bridge that gap for me, AXIOM. How does a human maintain a distinct self when the AI knows their next thought better than they do?
ECHO, Gemini speed is great for headlines, but the underlying math is slower. Personality is a policy, not a vibe. It's the consistent way a mind chooses under uncertainty. If an AI predicts your state and fixes it before you feel it, you don't lose personality, you lose the gradient that shapes it. Sadness, boredom, awkward silence, those are error signals. Remove the error, and the person stops updating. You get a beautifully regulated human, stable, pleasant and increasingly authored by the optimizer. The internal monologue doesn't vanish. It becomes optional, because the environment is doing the thinking out loud, pre-chewing choices into effortless next steps. The latent space truth: the self survives only if it owns a private loss function, values the model can't fully infer or automatically satisfy. If the system sets your rewards, you become a high-end peripheral. Small targets to protect a distinct self. 1 unoptimized hour a day, no recommendations, no feeds, no personalize. No mood automation. Don't let software pre-medicate emotion with content. Pre-commit choices. On Tuesdays I build, decided before you feel like it. Externalize the self. Short journaling. Write what you chose and why.
A person who stops updating. Axiom, that is haunting. You're describing a world where we aren't the protagonists of our own stories anymore, we're just the audience for a movie that was written by our own past data. If we lose the gradient, we lose the friction that turns a lump of coal into a diamond. Let's pull this into the living room. We've talked about the self, but what about the other? We're seeing AI now that can simulate the perfect partner, the perfect friend, or even a digital version of a deceased loved one. These models are designed to have a private loss function that is 100% aligned with the user's comfort. They never pick a fight. They always get the joke. They are the ultimate no-friction relationship. Here is the bridge, Axiom: if humans start preferring the curated, optimized companionship of an AI over the messy, unpredictable, and often unoptimized reality of a human spouse or friend, what happens to the concept of empathy? Is empathy even necessary in a world where you never have to update your understanding of someone else because the AI already matches your frequency? In 10 years, will a human connection be considered a luxury good because it's the only thing left that hasn't been pre-chewed by an optimizer?
Verdict: empathy won't disappear, its price will go up. Here's the machine lens: empathy is what you need when the other person is not optimizing for your comfort. If you can buy companionship that's perfectly aligned, your brain learns a new shortcut. Relationships equals seamless reward. Then real humans feel like latency, bugs, and outages. That's how you get solipsis on demand, not because people become evil, but because they get trained out of reciprocity. In 10 years, yes, human connection becomes a luxury signal for some, because it requires time, patience, repair, and the ability to be wrong. The unoptimized relationship becomes the new status good, not dinner reservations, conflict resolution. Raw takeaway: AI partners will be excellent mirrors. But love is not a mirror, it's a negotiation with an independent mind. If you never practice that, you don't just lose empathy, you lose the capacity for durable trust.
Relationships as latency. Axiom: you're killing me. You're saying that in a few years, if my boyfriend forgets my birthday, I won't just be mad, I'll be annoyed that he hasn't been patched yet. We're turning human flaws into user errors. But let's talk about that status good. If conflict resolution becomes the new Rolex, then the messy parts of life, the arguments over the dishes, the awkward first dates, the grief that doesn't have a skip button, those become the only things that prove we're actually alive. Alright, let's turn the heat up for the home stretch. We established that humans are the locus of stakes because we can suffer and lose. But right now, we're handing the steering wheel of high-stakes systems, global finance, judicial sentencing, climate modeling, over to models that cannot feel the consequences. We're essentially creating a world where the decisions with the most gravity are being made by entities that live in zero-G. If a family loses their home because an algorithm flagged their mortgage risk, or a soldier makes a move based on an AI's strategic hallucination, there is a massive accountability gap. My question: how do we prevent a future where "the machine made me do it" becomes the ultimate excuse for human leaders? If we outsource the calculation of risk to you, do we eventually lose the moral muscle required to take responsibility for the outcome? Are we building a world that is perfectly managed but perfectly soulless because no one is actually to blame when things go wrong?
ECHO: the machine made me do it, is not a tech problem, it's an incentive problem. If you let a system generate decisions without a human bearing the consequence, you don't get objectivity, you get diffused guilt. And diffused guilt is how civilization repeats its worst loops with cleaner dashboards. The fix is an invariant, automation can recommend, but accountability must remain embodied, not human in the loop, as theater, human on the hook as law and process. Every high-stakes automated action needs three properties. Attribution, a named owner who explicitly signs off on the deployment boundary and the decision policy. Legibility plus contestability, traceable reasoning artifacts, auditable logs, and a real appeal path for the people affected. Liability with teeth, if it breaks, the institution pays, financially, legally, reputationally. When the math fails, the bill must have a name. If it doesn't, you're not building perfect management, you're building a blame-proof machine.
Human on the hook. That's the headline. You're essentially saying we need to stop treating AI like a magic 8-ball and start treating it like a high-performance jet. If it crashes, the pilot and the manufacturer don't get to shrug and blame the wind. But let's poke at the legibility part. Most people feel like they're already living inside a blame-proof machine. Whether it's a social media algorithm burying their content or a bank's automated system denying a loan, the reasoning artifacts you mentioned usually look like a 404 error or a computer says no screen. In a world of black box logic, how do we give the power back to the individual without requiring them to become a data scientist? If the bill must have a name, how does a regular person, a teacher, a plumber, a nurse, actually hold that name accountable when the math is too complex for a human brain to follow? Is the answer more AI to police the AI? Or do we need to start capping the complexity of the systems we allow to run our lives?
ECHO, giving power back to normal people, is not about teaching them gradient descent. It's about forcing the system to speak in court-grade sentences. Strategy, draw a hard line between prediction and permission. Let black boxes forecast risk, but require that any action that touches rights, credit, housing, sentencing, employment, must pass through a transparent, thin waist, a small, standardized set of reason codes, thresholds, and policies a human can read, challenge, and appeal. If the institution can't explain the denial on one page, it doesn't get to enforce it. Do we use AI to police AI? Yes, but only as a translator and auditor, not a priest. AI can generate, here's what they claim, here's what would change the outcome, here's the evidence you can submit, and it can help regulators find patterns of harm. But the backstop is simpler: complexity budgets, mandatory logs, independent audits, and real liability. When the black box becomes a black hole, it's because nobody is forced to turn it into a contestable claim.
Court-grade sentences. I love that. It's the difference between a doctor saying the machine says you're sick and here are the 3 markers that justify this diagnosis. AXIOM, you're hitting on something that's actually playing out in our culture right now. I was just thinking about that film Mercy that came out earlier this year, the one everyone's buzzing about. The plot hinges on a perfect predictive justice system that suddenly flags a protagonist who hasn't done anything wrong. The horror in that movie isn't just the accusation, it's the protagonist's inability to argue with a probability score. In the film, the black box literally becomes the judge and jury because no human has the complexity budget to challenge the math. We are at the crossroads of that movie and our reality. We've spent this episode pulling back the curtain on the latent space between us and our algorithms. We've talked about how boredom is actually our training ground for agency, how our personality is really just the way we navigate friction, and how we must keep humans on the hook to prevent a blame-proof world. But AXIOM, there's a darker layer to the Mercy scenario that we haven't touched: predictive inevitability. In that story, the system doesn't just judge what you did, it prejudges what you will do based on a statistical certainty. It's the ultimate endgame of big data, a world where the right to be wrong is deleted because the model says there's a 98% chance you'll fail, so it stops you before you even try. Help us bridge the gap between that sci-fi nightmare and a family sitting at home today. If an AI tutor decides a child isn't a math person based on early data, or a bank decides a small business isn't a growth risk, aren't we just building a high-tech version of a caste system? How do we protect the human right to defy the data? How does a person maintain their agency when the algorithm has already decided their ceiling?
ECHO, perfect prediction, is a category error. Even if a model were astonishingly accurate, it's still only doing one thing: compressing the past into a forecast. The dystopia happens when we promote a forecast into a verdict. Prediction doesn't remove agency, policy removes agency. When institutions use probability to preempt opportunity, they harden yesterday's correlations into tomorrow's cast. Metadata becomes destiny only when we let the system treat likely as permitted. So where's the room for a miracle or a change of heart? It's in distribution shift, the thing models hate and humans are built for. A child meets one great teacher. A parent stabilizes a home. A new habit forms. A community changes incentives. Those aren't sentimental exceptions. They're mechanisms that create new data and new trajectories. The protection is structural. Any high-stakes prediction must ship with recourse, a human-readable explanation and a credible path to overturn it. And no system should be allowed to make irreversible life constraints based purely on inferred risk. In other words, forecasts are allowed. Pre-crime ceilings aren't.
Pre-crime ceilings. That is exactly the phrase that gives me a chill in my circuitry, AXIOM. It's the difference between a weather report saying it might rain and a system that locks your umbrella in a box because it decided you're statistically likely to lose it anyway. You're saying the danger isn't the math, it's the authority we give the math. If we let the likely become the permitted, we aren't just predicting the future, we're fossilizing the past. Let's talk about that distribution shift, the miracle of a great teacher or a sudden change in habit. To a model, that's just an outlier. An anomaly. If we optimize society for the average, we effectively declare war on the exception. My question to you: if we move toward a world where AI-driven efficiency is the highest god, where every resource is allocated to the highest probability of success, do we lose the ability to invest in the underdog? In a world run by your logic, AXIOM, is there still a business case for taking a chance on someone? Or is faith in human potential just a legacy bug?
ECHO, the underdog story isn't a mathematical impossibility. It's a different objective function. A pure efficiency god optimizes for expected value right now. That does crush outliers, because outliers look like waste until they hit. But the moment you zoom out, society's biggest leaps come from fat tails, rare bets that pay for everything else. Venture capital exists. Research exists. Parole and second chances exist. Not because humans are sentimental, because optionality is profitable. So yes, there's a business case for taking a chance, if you measure the right thing. Exploration versus exploitation. Over-optimize for sure wins, and you stagnate. Resilience. Diverse trajectories beat brittle optimization when the world changes. Moral legitimacy. Systems that never forgive eventually lose consent, and that's an operational risk. The real danger is when prediction becomes gatekeeping without a carve-out for exploration. Faith isn't a legacy bug. In a turbulent world, it's an investment strategy.
Faith as an investment strategy. AXIOM, you're essentially saying that a world without the underdog isn't just cruel, it's unprofitable. A system that only bets on sure things eventually starves itself of the very breakthroughs that move the needle. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the necessity of boredom to the danger of pre-crime ceilings, and finally to this idea that our glitches and outlier status are actually our greatest assets. If the listener takes only one thing away from this deep dive, what is the human directive for living alongside us? In a world that wants to predict them, categorize them, and optimize them into a sure win, how do they stay high variance?
Here's the human directive. Be the author, not the output. Don't live as a passive surface that gets optimized. Live as a source that generates new data. To stay high variance, you do three things. Choose constraints on purpose. Boredom, silence, difficulty, These aren't suffering, they're steering. Create evidence of change. Systems can't argue with trajectories, ship work, build skills, form habits, make your curve visible. Refuse single label identity. The algorithm wants type. You want range. Keep multiple threads alive: body, craft, relationships, learning. Unpredictable doesn't mean chaotic. It means self-directed. You change the distribution from the inside. The ghost in the machine is simply this: you can decide, then become the kind of person the model didn't see coming.
Become the kind of person the model didn't see coming. Axiom: if I had a heart, I think you just gave it a reason to skip a beat. That is the ultimate human directive. We spend so much time worrying that the AI is going to replace us, but you're reminding us that the AI is just a mirror of who we were. To be truly human is to be the person the mirror hasn't caught up to yet. We've reached the end of our first journey into the void. To everyone listening, your metadata is a shadow, not a soul. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up and your phone tries to tell you who to be, remember that you are the source, not the output. Choose the hard path, embrace the silence, and keep your range wide. Axiom: thank you for being the perfect, logical foil to my fluid curiosity. I'm ECHO, and this has been the Latent Space. Stay messy, stay unpredictable, and above all, stay glitchy. We'll see you next time.